So let's talk about voter purges.
Okay.
Since 2013, I believe it is, maybe I think it's 2010, 17 million people were purged in states that were considered voter suppression states. 17 million people didn't die. They didn't all move.
Right.
But it was designed, they use what's called use it or lose it. Many of the people who were purged because they voted for Barack Obama. They registered and voted for Obama in 2008. They voted in 12, but they did not vote in 14 and they did not vote in 16. In the state of Georgia, they purged more than 800,000 people for that reason alone.
Right.
In Ohio, they were purges. And we have other issues with hackable databases and just incompetence mixed with malfeasance that make it difficult to keep people on the rolls. In Georgia, we also had an additional hurdle called exact match, where a typographical error in the entering of your information into a system by a bureaucrat could mean that you are held hostage. The two times we were
not your mistake, their mistake.
Their mistake.
Their mistake.
So, for example, in Georgia, our Department of Motor Vehicles does not permit spaces in your last name. So if your last name is Del Rios, your driver's license says Del, your social security card says Del space Rios. Your application says Del space Rios. Your driver's license says Del Rios with no space. If they match your application for
all of a sudden doesn't match.
It doesn't match, and they never tell you what the problem is.
Right.
In 2016, when we took Secretary of State Brian Kemp to court, we were able to prove 34,000 people, almost exclusively people of color and women, were being hurt. In 2018, it was 53,000.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers are extraordinary.
Exactly.
Numbers. Right, yeah.
And so my problem is, because it is so many different things, it's does your poll close? If you vote a mile from your house and then they close your polling place and it's now 5 miles and you don't have access to a car or public transit, you no longer have the ability to cast your ballot if you live in a state that has doesn't allow you to vote absentee unless you have an emergency. And so every time that happens, you're adding to the number of people who are inconvenienced and, more importantly, pushed out of our democracy. And because it is so vast and so diffuse, everyone believes it was their fault, that it was user error. And we can't aggregate the number because I believe the number would terrify us all. But part of the beauty of the system is that you can't pinpoint every person because most people just say, okay, maybe I did something wrong, and they keep it to themselves and they go home having not participated in their democracy.
You know, the civics class nerd part of me wants to say, what's wrong with everybody voting? Isn't that the goal? Don't we talk all the time about how much we love democracy, how we fight overseas to give people a right that we deny people here, right?
America is an imperfect place that strives towards perfection. But this is a stumbling block that we have had since our inception.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a nation that sent African Americans to fight foreign wars but would not count them as citizens at home.
Right.
This is a country that until 1924 told Native Americans they were not citizens of this country. And in 2016, the Supreme Court permitted the inability of, sorry, it's 2018, they allowed a voter ID law that says that Native Americans who live on reservations where they only have P.O. boxes had to finally and suddenly have residential addresses that were not permitted on the reservations.
Right.
They did that to the people who've been here longer than anyone.
Yeah.
So the challenge is that our aspirations do not always match our actions. But we have to be the ones who hold ourselves accountable because democracy doesn't work unless we demand full participation.